So, Bob Varsha, if you could describe this meal we've just had in one word, what would it be?
Cleansing.
That's good.
Yeah, I
that's
like
solid.
that.
All
Yeah.
right. That's it. Perfect.
Do you want the background for why I thought?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, it forces you to think about things. What might they want to talk about? What would my answers be? How do I really feel about, what do I want to say? What do I not want to say? That kind of thing. I think it's good to reflect every now and then. Maybe that's a better word, reflective. But
You want a second try?
Sure.
You're still beating Catherine. So. All right. So Bob Varsha, if you could describe our meal together in just one word, what would it be?
Reflective.
And now for Dinner with Racers, presented by
Continental Tire.
with your hosts, Ryan Eversley and Sean Heckman.
Placeholder radio sound. I'm a driver. I'm very angry. This is the sound of a driver on the radio during a race.
What do you think I should order?
Welcome to Dinner with Racers. My name is Ryan Eversley, and I'm alongside my co-host, Sean Heckman.
I am currently eating Pringles. So, if we sound a little punchy and tired, it's because, well, we've been in a car together for 30 days straight.
I hate you so much right now.
And what is the vehicle that we're in just at?
This is my Acura MDX.
Interesting. Now, this Acura has a certain kind of tire on it.
It's a Continental tire,
Huh. Continental seems to be a big supporter of this.
and so we like them a lot.
Thank you, Continental. We have gone 8,000 miles across 20 states to have 27 different conversations over lunch, over dinner, over breakfast with people in racing, team owners, drivers, media types, people outside the sport, maybe looking to get in, IndyCar, short tracks, stock cars, sports cars, you name it, we tried to cover it. All so that you, the audience, who got it for free, can still whine about it. So, speaking of people within the industry, Ryan and I were lucky enough to pack up the Acura MDX, right?
That's correct.
With Continental Tires.
Exactly.
And go a whole 1 block from where you live in Atlanta
That's correct.
to Inman Park, where we went to, what was the name of the restaurant?
Folk art.
Folk Art.
It's literally 4 doors away from my front door.
There it is. But we still got in the Acura and drove.
Yeah, well, we had to.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the deal. But we met up with none other than Bob Varsha.
The Bob Varsha.
And that's a personal hero of both of ours. And if there's anything to get out there right now, it's that while Ryan and I both are fortunate enough to know Bob, we don't exactly know him well, and he certainly owes us nothing.
Exactly.
And so for a guy like that to come out, show up, eat lunch with us, kind of unprovoked, was very special for both of us. And the conversation with the guy was absolutely amazing. So for those who don't know who Bob Varsha is, he's most known in sort of the modern era as a guy who is a television commentator for Fox Sport, but he also comes previously from Speed, ESPN, covered F1, IndyCar, sports car, figure skating, and a number of other sports. And we learn about where he came from, how he got here, his life in Atlanta, his life growing up in Long Island in literally the same city as Andy Lally. And he's actually got a pretty good sense of humor about it all.
Yeah, he showed up the morning after the WeatherTech Series banquet and might have been nursing a bit of a hangover, but was in good spirits and just treated us like he'd known us forever.
So, once again, thanks to Folk Art for letting us kind of set up shop there. What did you have?
I had the BLT and the cucumber salad.
And I had a chicken sandwich. And once again, thank you to Continental Tire for making this possible.
All right, we're going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Yeah, I'm rolling. So, yeah, now we're rolling, we're good. So, yeah, we're good to go. So, and he's going straight to the shitter.
I like that
That is
intro.
awesome.
Oh, he really is.
Yeah. Hey.
He literally just gave us like the "What's up, guys?"
Yeah, I think he literally walks in, sees us, does the like half-hearted wave.
And then it's like, if I go to the bathroom for an hour, they'll probably just leave.
That'll be Dover. So that's pretty much that.
Looks like there's a wait.
He's got the cue.
Do you think he's just drunk right now? And he's kind of.
Is he a little hungover?
He might. I
That
mean,
would be fucking awesome.
right. That would be the interview I'd want to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Oh, he's coming over.
oh, here he comes, the great Bob Varsha. I don't know if you've ever spoken into a microphone before.
Now these headsets are
Are you not a headset guy?
kind of goofy. No, I'm fine.
Okay. So it was late. So you're a little knackered from the award ceremony.
Yeah, more than I expected to be. But hotel rooms you've never been in before. It's hard to predict.
Right. That's part of the thing is that you're taking our fields.
Yeah, it's real life. You have to sign a waiver, by the way, in case this gets used.
Can I get y'all something to drink?
I'd like some unsweet iced tea with lemon, please.
Arnold Palmer,
Unsweet or sweet tea?
unsweetened on the tea side.
My name's Allie. If y'all need anything, just let me know.
Cool.
Okay,
Can I
Alec.
get a Diet Coke, Allie? Thank you.
That's one of I find the things with living in the South, because you're from Long Island, right?
Originally,
In the South, I always forget, coming from California, you have to specify unsweetened iced tea. That is not. So like when you ask for an Arnold Palmer, sometimes it is a half sweetened iced tea and half lemonade. So it's literally just as much sugar as they can
Yeah,
have.
it's like
And
rock
all that.
candy.
Yeah, exactly. the thing. So,
yeah, that's a Southern thing.
yeah. But anyway, so you had the awards banquet last night, and so are you a little beat up?
Yeah, just a little bit. It's kind of tense because you want the thing to go smoothly.
Right.
Actually, Justin Bell and I had done the IMSA banquet the last couple of years,
Right.
so we kind of had a little feel for each other. Yeah, Calvin was doing it for the first time, and Calvin is a perfectionist, and he wants to make sure every T is crossed and every I is dotted, and,
Right.
and you love him for it. But there was a lot of tension, and it's not just because of his sense of perfectionism, but these things are, it's like the entry list for an event like the Sebring 12 Hours. It changes constantly, right up to the green flag.
Right.
And that's kind of what we were dealing with as a group last night
Sure.
with the IMSA people. Which corporate VIP is going to show up. And
Ah,
we
okay.
actually drop kicked one of them
Thank you.
when Sonny Whelan came out to pick up the award for the 31 car.
Cool.
He's the Arnold Palmer.
I'm the Arnold Palmer guy, and that's there
There
we
you
go.
go.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You just can't predict these things because a couple of guys will get backstage and say, "Oh, you did more than I did. You go take the award." So I turn around and it's like, "What? Who?"
Nice.
So there's that. So it's a little bit.
So those, is like an award show every bit as nerve-wracking as a broadcast? Because
No.
in my mind, yeah, I would say it's people it's not being televised.
Yeah.
So
Everyone's a little loosened up.
Well, that's part of the fun of a broadcast, particularly a
loosened up
live
is one way of
broadcast.
saying it.
Right.
Right. There's a certain amount of that. You're among friends. Everybody knows what you're talking about. Awards banquets are like, high school graduation or
Sure.
a wedding. If you want to get married, just go down and talk to the judge. You're married. But if you
Right.
want to throw a party and you want to have all the bells and whistles.
Neither of us
and-
will ever know what that means. Go on.
Oh, you've never been before a judge, huh?
Not for
I
a
didn't say
wedding.
that. But,
No, it's that funny mix. You want to be you want everybody to have a great time. You want everybody to feel respected. But it's 3.5 hours long. I mean,
Right.
you want to have some fun with it too.
Right.
And that can be a little bit difficult sometimes. Humor is hard. I mean, I tried to have
No.
some fun with the James French Chris Cumming thing last night, and I think I went one reference too far on that.
I'm pretty sure I would disagree if I'd seen it. But go on. Because I would say humor is not difficult. Humor that's acceptable is difficult.
That's exactly right.
Well, there
that's
you
probably
go.
the challenge,
And you don't want to leave out part of your audience.
Yeah.
And a lot of those folks are, spouses and significant others
Sure.
that just sit across from somebody for whom racing or the automobile business generally or the television business is, day to day, all day, every day. And so you're probably wondering what they're mumbling about most of the time. So you
Right.
got to kind of include them, which is what I tried to do with the James French Chris Cumming qualifying thing.
Sure.
And, you get what you get.
Did you see the
I
timing
did.
and scoring?
I did. I'll let you, because that was your creation.
I was very
I'm
proud
not going
of
to take
it.
credit for it.
How do you pronounce the middle guy's name? Is it
Me.
May? It is
Me,
me.
yeah.
So on the timing, you may have seen this when you were doing it, but James French and Connor Daly were racing together during Petite.
Uh-huh.
And what's me's first name? I don't know.
Jerome, I think.
Jerome.
Yeah.
So Jerome me. But literally their handle on timing and scoring was French me Daly. And I'm looking at it, just wondering, how am I the only
Right.
one noticing
Possible,
this?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who scripted that?
Exactly, but so for those who go to the banquet, I'm not really a party guy because
Yeah.
I'm socially awkward by nature, but it's synonymous, with a lot of racing folks. They'll go out and do a late night. You don't strike me as a guy who's going to be out till 4 a.m, having your fun. But
There
maybe
was
you
a
are.
time when I probably would have,
Sure.
but not in this particular instance. I was there with my wife for one thing, since we live in Atlanta, and she came along.
Thank you. Now you live in, so you've never really been here, right? Because I don't know Atlanta the way you would, Ryan, but you live in Midtown?
Yeah, I live in Midtown near
Which is-
a place called Atlantic Station, which is a big, multi-purpose complex in the current style.
And
I
it's
live in a
considered-
high-rise condo.
Oh, nice. So does Andy.
When
Okay.
you're driving into the city from the north going south, it's the first like tall buildings on the right,
Right.
as opposed to the main downtown on the left.
And have you been here for a while?
43 years.
Holy shit, that's a while. So it's to me, it's like I'm not an Atlanta local, but certainly
Yeah.
I've come through, with years of
Oh, everybody
racing.
does.
And it seemed to me like it's like the fourth ward where we're at right now
Yep.
has changed significantly
Oh,
over,
yeah.
from over the last few years. How have you seen Atlanta grow?
I came here in 1973, right out of college, to go to law school at Emory,
Yeah.
thinking that was going to be my future. And Atlanta had this boomtown reputation, but
Sure.
that was less than a decade after the tough times of the civil rights era, and Atlanta was still a very kind of a polarized town in a lot of ways. A lot of white flight into the suburban communities. Everybody wanted to live in places like Alpharetta and Roswell
Sure.
and so on. Meanwhile, the black middle class was rising, and they all sort of began developing the South Side. So Atlanta was, you were a North Side or a South Sider based mainly on race. There was very little in the way of downtown things to do, restaurants and that sort of thing, and that has come full circle, at least I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
These days, young people are coming back in town. A lot of these high-rise condo buildings are being built. There's a vibe. There's more clubs, more nice restaurants, more things to do. Certainly, the sports teams have had their ups and downs, but there's been more ups than downs recently. So yeah, it's got a much better vibe, I think, over the years.
Right. And now our good buddy Andy Lally is from Long Island. You're from Long Island. I believe you guys
Right.
are from the same city, even, right?
Same
You're both
town,
Northport
yeah.
boys.
Same hometown.
Same high school. Yeah.
When, Lally, there's only like a few key words that kind of give up the fact that he's a Long Island guy. But you go to Long Island, and it's a whole different Lally that comes out.
Oh,
from
absolutely.
him.
I'm sure.
And if I were to talk to you, I would have no idea. Is there a slip ever? Like, do you ever put out the
Oh,
couple of
yeah.
words?
It's kind of your environment. My wife likes to tease me when we go up north. My mom is now 95, still lives in a second-floor walk-up in my hometown. And when we go up there to visit her and my sisters, my wife says I change. I come out the Hertz rental car at LaGuardia Airport and get into that traffic, and I become a New Yorker again, man. Forget about it. I'm out there on the road. I'm cutting people off. I'm not using my signal. That's for sissies.
Sleeves just get blown off your shirt right away.
right.
Yeah.
I went, when I was about, 13, 14 years old, I went to visit cousins out in California.
Yeah.
Had a nice time, came back home, went to college, and found myself out in California on a springtime trip with the Glee Club, and spent some more time.
That's our
with
next
those-
question.
Okay.
Yeah, but go on.
Yeah. And one of the things my cousin said to me when they saw me again, 5, 6 years later, was, "You lost your accent." And I thought, what accent? I don't have any accent.
That's awesome, right?
But I'm sure back in the day, I talked like a kid from the island.
Exactly.
And I don't know how or whether I lost it, but apparently I have.
right. Is your wife from Atlanta?
Beg pardon?
Is your
she
wife from Atlanta, yeah.
Originally Jackson, Mississippi.
Oh.
But she went to high school here, lived here ever since.
Sure.
So, yeah, she's a Southerner.
So she
but
gets
she doesn't have a Southern accent.
Right.
So you say.
Well,
Yeah.
of course, we are in Atlanta.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
is not the South. This is Atlanta.
Right. That's correct.
That's a
correct.
fair point. So Glee Club.
Yeah.
In high school or when,
In high
where did
school,
this
I
go?
sang, yeah.
Okay.
I come from a slightly musical family. My sister is a very fine actress. And so I got involved in that kind of stuff. I was in the band and the chorus and the orchestra.
Nice.
As
You were a
well
ladies'
as my
man.
running career. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of chicks in the band. And I just, when I went to Dartmouth College up in Hanover, New Hampshire, it was all male.
Right.
And the Glee Club sounded like a cool thing to do, so I did that. And, I actually had an ulterior motive because when I got there, it was their sesquicentennial, 250th anniversary. And so the Glee Club was a part of this big multimedia show that was going to travel the country during spring break
Right.
to raise money, as colleges inevitably do. And it was great fun. And we went to all these wonderful cities and met all these great people. And I rented a motorcycle in San Francisco and became sort of a
You were the cool
demi-legend
guy at
for
the
that.
Glee
I was
Club.
Oh,
You were
right.
the Glee
definitely.
Club
Yeah.
badass.
Absolutely.
That's what
absolutely.
they say.
No helmet, just flying down the road. Almost got blown off the highway when you passed the San Francisco airport with the jets back right up to the runway.
Nice.
in order to take off.
Reckless Robert of the Glee Club.
Yeah, but I only did that one year because they weren't doing a tour the next year, and things got busier. But
Sure.
yeah, I used to sing.
So the common theme I'm hearing is performance. you know, even legal. You know, if you're a trial lawyer, there's a hell of a performance element to that. What you're doing,
sure.
what you're doing, obviously with broadcasting.
Absolutely.
Is that kind of? Have you always been the guy who's in a show or doing a thing on stage?
I was always kind of a member of the chorus in the show. I wasn't any kind of a star. I actually went to high school 2 years ahead of me, and my older sister's class was a woman named Patti LuPone, who was a multi-time Tony Award winner, big Broadway star right now. If you know anything about Broadway musical theater, you know who Patti LuPone is. And she was in high school with me, and she was always the star.
Nice.
Yeah, we did South Pacific.
Have you guys ever
She
met up
really-
to argue who's more famous now?
You know, I would love to, but no. And there's no question. I'd be punching above my weight in that argument.
Yeah, she's like, "Where's your Peabody?"
She's a
Like,
superstar.
yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's funny the people you meet as you go through life.
Sure.
So you were like pretty accomplished runner.
Mhm.
When did that start? When did you pick up the running thing? Because running wasn't that
When I
popular.
found out after football, basketball, and baseball that I couldn't do anything else, so I went out for the track team. And I was
That
originally going to
sounds
be
relatable.
I wanted to be a jumper. I didn't want to train too hard, so I thought, hey, jumping, how hard can it be?
I want the jacket. I don't want to have to put all the work into it.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You go out there and jump over a bar, and
You
you're
were
a hero.
made for the media.
Well, and it turns out I wasn't very good at that either. But I blundered into a race one day. You know, it was high school track. What the heck? You know, I should jump in this race. So I got into the race, and it turns out I was pretty good at it. So, you know, positive reinforcement. You get a little of that, and you try a little harder, and you get some more results, and the process continues. And by the end of high school, if I may say so, I was a pretty accomplished runner. Went to college, ran 3 seasons of cross country, indoor and outdoor track. And made all Ivy, and figured at the end of college that was going to be the end of that. But I happened to move to Atlanta, and here's one of those strange coincidences of life again. I fell in with a bunch of guys here who were about my age, and we were all training, and I thought, well, what the heck, I'll just keep doing it.
Right.
And
this
through
was
that,
at Emory?
I was at Emory, living in the neighborhood, and I fell in with a bunch of guys from the Atlanta Track Club,
Okay.
and including an old high school buddy who came down, and we shared an apartment because he was in architecture school over at Georgia Tech. And so we ran and, drank beer and had a great old time. And I wound up going to the Olympic trials in 1976. I had matured. I hadn't trained myself into, a broken down Hulk through high school and college. So I still had something to show for it. And had a great trials in 76, just missed the Montreal Games team.
Jeez.
Did less well in 1980, but it wouldn't have mattered anyway. That was the Moscow Games that nobody went to
Right.
from the United States. And so I became, pretty well known in the Atlanta running scene. Became the first executive director of the Atlanta Track Club, which was booming at that time. This is the late 70s. Jim
Right.
Fix had just written, one of the first books about running your way to perfect health, and died at 44 or whatever it was.
Great book.
Through no fault of his own. And so I organized this event, our biggest event. We do 1 million events all year round, but the big one is every July 4th, the Peachtree Road Race.
Yep.
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution
Big deal
Peachtree
here.
Road Race.
Really big deal here.
I'll take
now
your word for it.
We get 65,000 people running down Peachtree Street
Wow.
on a hot, humid 4th of July morning.
Sounds so fun.
That's
Yeah,
right.
in fact,
well, it's the stories I could tell you about that. When I was the executive director, about a guy who had died and was going to be buried in his Peachtree Road Race T-shirt, and after we have to close it off for the applications for safety reasons, I get guys trying to cheat their way in. One guy tried to pencil in a stamp on his envelope with his entry form and his check in it to try to convince me that he actually did mail it before the deadline. And I looked at it and I took an eraser to it, and the whole thing just smeared.
Couldn't he just show up and sneak under a barrier and run with everybody, or is it you got to have the bid?
But but for legal reasons and liability and all that kind of stuff, we have to be meticulous.
Oh, I
about
understand that.
it. So anyway,
I've never wanted to exercise that bad to cheat my way into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be humid.
I would have gone the other way.
Exactly.
Like, hey guys, look how fast I ran. I wrote it down.
now you see, you're the guy who gives race drivers a bad name, because you hear all these sports commentators
There's
saying,
plenty of reasons, by the way, for that. That has nothing to do with running.
Well, I'm looking
Racing
forward to a
drivers-
new side of it.
yeah, you're not an athlete if I do it sitting down.
Right, right.
So anyway, I sort of rotated out of that job because I thought I was going to be a big-time attorney, and lo and behold, I get a phone call from Turner Broadcasting. They wanted to shoot the race live. They wanted to do a 4th of July thing. And somehow they got my name as a guy who knew all about the race. So I did the job with a veteran Atlanta sportscaster named Bob Neal, who showed up in the typical announcer garb with the blue blazer and the razor sharp haircut and gray flannel slacks, and I was there in my.
Is that where you got the hair thing from? Was
Yeah, probably in reaction there too.
Okay.
I'm still trying to piss off my late father, I think. And now my son has long hair, and I can't say a single word
you're
about
paying
it.
the price.
right.
Yeah. But
So
go on.
I show up in my window pane plaid 3-piece suit with hair down to my shoulders and this really bad Jeff Gordon style mustache.
Does a photo of this exist, by the way?
I
Because
certainly
if it
hope
doesn't,
not.
we're going to find it.
I didn't
So,
know there was a mustache involved.
Oh,
I'm
I
excited
live in
about this.
terror. I
long
am
hair,
stark.
mustache.
The ladies
Wow.
didn't stand a chance.
I live in
Yeah.
fear that some of these pictures are going to turn up someday. But I figure it's like the early Super Bowl, that all the networks shot and nobody kept any videotape of. There is no broadcast.
We have resources. We have ways.
Well, okay.
All right, go on.
Well, hopefully, my Peachtree Road Race broadcast is somewhere with Super Bowl 1 and 2 because they no longer exist.
Right.
So I did it, and, we shook hands, and I said, great, and went off to my life. And about 6 weeks later, I got a call from Turner asking me if I wanted to audition for a part-time job in news.
Well, I could see that.
Well, I thought it was news, so I
Yeah.
picture myself as the next Walter Cronkite, of course, and what I wind up doing is what were called news watches, which are like 3 little 10-second headlines that you read in the commercial breaks of the late movies between 12:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, you were
it's
that guy.
Me in this cavernous dark studio and one guy falling asleep in master control, and I'm grabbing wire copy and I'm putting together. First night I work is Halloween night.
Oh, okay. It's a
In
good night
whatever
for
it was, 1980, I guess.
Right.
And so I saw this story about this kid who had dressed up as a soldier in combat and had gone to the door of a veteran of Vietnam who was obviously
Not impressed.
PTSD.
Yeah.
Right.
And this guy shot the
flashback.
kid.
Wow. Okay.
Fortunately, didn't kill the kid, but I thought this was a gripping story.
Yeah.
Next day, I get a phone call from the execs at Turner saying, "Don't do a story like that."
It's Halloween. Come
So
on.
this is how we learn.
Yeah.
There were also 3 very attractive women in the department, and then me. So a lot of those nights I sat up late, took phone calls from,
Sure.
elderly cattle ranchers and business executives wanting to know where Gwen or Marilyn or whatever, and would I write down a marriage proposal that I could leave in their mailbox for the next day, that kind of thing.
That's apparently a real problem, by the way.
What's
Is like
that?
local news girls getting stalked.
Really?
Because apparently it's one of the most relatable professions.
Sure.
Because you're pretty, you're interacting every day,
And
delivering
you look
news.
like you're concerned.
Yeah, exactly.
When we know you're not. And we know you haven't read your copy before you got on there, which is why you get to the end of a sentence before you see the period.
Waiting for the next thing to scroll.
Right.
Right.
And that's that applies to the guys as well as the girls. So anyway, I did that for a while, and then CNN, the Turner empire was just blossoming at that time. So I went to CNN Radio for a while, which was another great learning experience, and then to CNN's CNN2, as it was called then, now HLN, and switched from news to sports because sports looked like a lot more fun. And so I.
It's awesome.
Long story short, I find myself in an apartment with, among others, Keith Olbermann, Dan Patrick, Kathleen Sullivan, and the list goes on and on
And
and
this
on.
is early 80s, so no one is
very
anybody
early
at
in
this
their
point.
careers,
Yeah, right.
Just having a great time. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. But the department head was a guy named Bill McPhail, who comes from a legendary American sports family. His brothers ran baseball teams and president of the American League, and Bill was one of these guys who had been at every athletic event on the planet, worked for CBS for a long time. And he was just a great, great boss. Such a good boss that he was the guy who fired me and made me feel good about it. Because he could do that. He could come in and say, look, you're not going to work here anymore, but you're really good at this. You can do this if you need a recommendation, and on and on and on. And so, going to lunch with Bill became sort of a euphemism for you're out of here, dude.
Right.
And that
it's
befell
not you,
me.
it's me.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
But that was cool because while I was there at CNN for about 4 years, I got to know the guys at a company called World Sports Enterprises, which was founded by Fred Reinstein and Ken Squire.
Ken Squire, right.
And they decided they wanted to put this program on the air called Motor Week Illustrated, the first motorsports anthology show with Dave Despain and a whole bunch of other names you'd recognize now. But they would shoot the show as a donut. They'd shoot the show on Wednesday with all the highlights of the previous weekend action.
Yeah.
And use features and whatever they want, but they would always leave a hole in the middle because the show would air on Saturday night, and you
So you
had
wanna
to
have the
include
breaking, right, yeah.
whatever had just happened that weekend. So they needed a guy on the inside, and I auditioned for that job, and I actually beat out Brad Nessler for that job, if you know that name. Brad's a
Can't say I
big
do.
star with ESPN doing football and basketball.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah.
So they
great
needed somebody
guy.
who was quick on their feet, the ability to improv and just sort of go with, here's what's
Well,
going on right now.
Yeah, and I think that I had the advantage I had over Brad is that I was working at Turner at the time.
Yeah,
Brad was
sure.
sort of a freelancer. I was
So
working
you were a
there.
known entity.
So I did it, and I got to know those guys. And so when I got FIFO'd at CNN, I went across the street to the guys at Motor Week Illustrated and said, is there a full-time gig here? And they said, yeah, come on. Working out of a trailer in the parking lot at Turner Broadcasting.
Nice.
So off we went.
Did you have pressure from your parents to go the lawyer route, or was that something you came up with on your
No,
own?
that was something I pretty much decided I wanted to do. Those were the Vietnam years, and so I'm trying to figure out. My draft number was 4. You guys are probably too young to remember the draft
But I know
numbers.
what it is.
Okay.
But yeah.
I read about it on Wikipedia.
Exactly.
Yeah, I missed out on the, but we had about a $400 bonus pool in the dormitory. Everybody threw in $5 when they held the drawing because we were all about the same age. And
Yeah.
the low man was going to get all the money, and I missed by 1. So that was kind of the story of my life. So anyway, I looked at, didn't want to go to vet school, didn't want to go to business school. You know, what am I going to do?
Sure.
So I took the law SATs.
So
and did pretty
so basically,
well
if
at
you
it.
had a secondary school, you still managed to not. So like going to law school or medical school, that secondary school would keep you out of
Yeah,
the draft.
I was the last class to get a student deferment.
Okay.
Yeah, because my question or my interest is that you went from a law degree to practicing to then completely switching careers
Yeah.
to commentary, and a lot of people spend so much time focusing on what
Yeah.
that career is going to be that you then basically just changed,
Yeah.
you know, with no formal background in
Yeah, and that was hard on my dad because he
Right.
really liked the idea of me being a lawyer.
it. Sure.
As dads and moms will tend to do.
Not right.
But the TV
Can't relate at all.
the TV gig was. Have you got one of those in your background?
No, I don't have any lawyers in my family. But when I originally went to UCLA,
Uh-huh.
it was to become a lawyer.
Uh-huh.
I was like, I can work in TV, Mom, and yeah.
Don't
you
be
know,
an
and
idiot.
And then you do the internships, and you're working for free, and you have to sort of
Right.
justify, no, it's good experience, I'm networking, and
I'm
the
going
whole
somewhere
thing.
with this, Mom. Well,
Back
I
when
went through
I was
that
in
same
college.
experience with my dad, and
Yeah.
forever it was like, geez, do you think you'll ever go back to the law? And I said, no.
Yeah.
And then finally, you advance to a certain point in your career, and pretty soon my dad's friends are calling saying, hey, I saw your son Bob on the show the other day. So now he's just
Yeah, it
proud
changes
as hell.
everything. It's
He's like,
amazing
oh,
how all of a
that's
sudden
my
when you-
son, the TV guy.
Yeah,
Right.
I remember the
Right.
first time my name showed up on the credits of Crossing Jordan on NBC,
Uh-huh.
and the whole world changed as far as like how supportive it had all been up until then. So
Right.
I can understand.
He's a
this, but,
star.
Yeah,
Yeah, so for a while I tried doing law and the TV thing while that was developing.
yeah,
But finally I just, had to make a decision
Yeah.
for a lot of different reasons. And I did. I decided to go with the TV thing. And it was, purely a matter of me being in the right place at the right
sure,
time.
sure.
To get in at Turner, which was a non-union shop, so I
Right.
could do everything and learn everything, editing and writing and how to use the news wires and how to sit in front of the camera and where to put the microphone and all that kind of stuff, how to dress, how to groom yourself, which obviously I forgot.
Again, can't.
Well, that may be
Can't
why
think
I
we
got
can.
fired.
Yeah, let's say
It's,
you're the most professional in this group. That's for sure.
So, I went across the street to Turner and to World Sports, and it was another one of those deals. Say, okay, you're going to work on the show, and we're going to send you out to the various Camel GT races where you're going to do video news reports on
Right.
what happens. Basically, we'd go there. R.J. Reynolds would pay me.
Yeah.
I'd go out, I'd shoot parts of the race, interview everybody afterwards, compile short feature, medium feature, long feature, voice them myself, send a script, uplink the packages,
Right.
which they could either use with my voice or without. It was just a way to put the series in front of sports directors around the country.
And I'm guessing at this point you go into this not really having been a devout car guy or a huge race fan
yeah,
or
I
anything
didn't have
like
a finished idea what I was looking at for
that.
a long time.
No, I understand that.
But that was
Again,
part of the challenge and the fun
Right.
was to
Right.
learn it. And the folks that I was working with were great. The drivers were all a lot of fun. Learned a lot.
Right. And this is
and
Camel GT in the late 80s.
in the late 80s,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Actually, the mid 80s.
Right, and it's at its peak, so
Right,
there's
but
a
it's
lot
the
of buzz
heyday
going
of the
behind
series,
it.
right.
So
Yeah,
it's not
and,
like it's
and pretty soon I'm talking to guys like A.J. Foyt and Al Enzer Sr. and
Tom Pompelli.
right.
yeah, very possibly.
They were gone.
David Hobbs and Derek Bell and Jochen Moss and all these guys. So it was fun as I began to realize who they are and get a sense of the history of the sport and what was going on and how the races work and all the dynamics. And along the way, I met a bunch of guys from a small company called ESPN.
Heard
who
of it.
said,
Heard of it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know whatever happened to them, but
They
said,
eight channels now.
"Are you going to
Ocho.
be at all these races?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's kind of the plan for right now." And they said,
Right.
"Well, how'd you like to host our shows?" I said, "Okay." And so I became a host, and that's another example of just sort of being in the right place at the right time. And whenever, hey, you want to do this? Sure. Want to do that? I left World Sports in 1990, I guess, and became a full-time freelancer with ESPN. And pretty soon I was doing figure skating and roller disco fishing and water ski jumping. And I was always the guy. One year I did 200 shows. I mean, we would
Wow.
do like 6 a weekend.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Well, now here's the thing. So it's like racing you didn't know anything about. Now you wouldn't know this about me, and I think Ryan you would. I actually, beyond my love of motorsports, figure skating is a legitimate love of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I used to skate and the whole thing. So I would watch, World Championship skating in the
Mm-hmm.
mid '90s, and here I am, this guy who's watching F1 when I can at 4 a.m. in San Francisco, and Bob Varsha is on the air doing that, and then all of a sudden the same hole is covering.
Welcome to the World Championships
Yeah, exactly. Like
of-
covering
yeah.
Liu Chen winning the
Right.
World Championships in
Right.
1995. And I'm guessing, like, he's got to have no idea who these people are or what the hell they're doing. But maybe you did. I have no idea. But
Well-
you sounded like you did, and that was the amazing part to me.
You have
So-
to achieve that certain modicum of knowledgeability, so you can give
Sure.
it some credibility. But to be honest, what I do as a host, and the same thing that Al Michaels does, and the same thing Jim Nantz does, and the same thing all of the guys who do what I do, is that my skills and what I bring to the broadcast really doesn't change from
Right.
sport to sport. I don't have to know if, was that a Lutz or an Axel or, that kind
In
of
fact,
stuff.
you could just name those two jumps. I don't think you could. right.
Well, it depends on which direction you're going and which edge of the skate
Yep.
you come off
Yep.
and which one you
If
land
there's
on.
a toe pick and the whole thing.
Sooner or later, some of it just goes in by osmosis, I
Sure.
guess. But if I'm working with great color commentators next to me, usually ex-athletes, people who really know is that
Right.
good, bad, or indifferent,
Right.
then we're good. And I can just pose questions from time to time, and as I learn things, I can add a little bit of expertise.
Well, it seems like you're really good at picking up what are the little kind of unique items of each athlete. Sort of, give a couple little factoids on, Andy Lally's from here, or
Yeah.
Michelle Kwan did this, or whatever it is.
Well, that's what I learned early on from Ken Squire was people are not going to invest themselves in a broadcast, no matter what the sport is, unless they know enough about the key players, about
Sure.
the people in the drama,
Sure.
enough to care about what happens to them,
Right.
whether they win or lose or, all that sort of thing. So that became sort of my area of expertise, if you will,
Sure.
looking for those sorts of elements that fill out a profile of an athlete that you're
Right.
watching.
Right.
And it's just been great fun. Going back to the law thing, people say, well, do you feel sorry you've invested all that time in law school? And I say not at all, because, the things I learned in law school about properly researching and presenting a case, no matter what it might happen to be, is advocacy, and that's what storytelling
Sure,
is
right.
advocacy. Here's the arc of what's going on out there. Here's who this person is, how they got here, why it's important that they do well, or how bad it is if they do poorly.
What was the legal route you were going down, by the way?
The legal route?
Yeah, like
I was
what-
a corporate litigator.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The best kind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Long cases,
Right.
and rooms full of discovery documents and
Yeah.
what have you. And, I can't really say, I would have been the next F. Lee Bailey or something.
Sure.
I was probably a pretty crummy lawyer when you get right down to it. But, but who
Yeah.
knew when you're buried in, in legalese?
Yeah, and 1,000 pages
Yeah.
of discovery on whatever.
Doesn't mean I wouldn't be doing it if the TV thing hadn't come along. And
Sure.
it's certainly an honorable profession for the right people. But,
Yeah.
there's a lot of schmucks out there, too.
Sure.
And,
Well, and when this Fox Sports thing fizzles out, you've always got something to fall
yeah,
back on.
right. I
so-
can always go take the bar exam again. And
Get back out there.
yeah.
You ever seen Better Call Saul?
Oh, yeah.
It's an amazing
My
show.
wife and I watch it all the time. Yeah, I like Bob Odenkirk a lot.
Yeah.
It's weird. Well, we started with Breaking Bad and then
Yep.
got into Better Call Saul,
Yeah, right. Yep.
as just about everybody on the planet did,
But
apparently.
so, as a former lawyer, do you ever look at like what at this point in the story, Jimmy McGill?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever look at his character and kind of when's like, oh God, a couple wrong steps, I could have been this guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which causes you to sit and speculate. How do you get there? It's that same process of investing in a personality, in a character. In
Right.
drama we do it all the time, but in sports we don't think we actually do it, but we do.
Sure.
And even if it's somebody you don't know much about,
Right.
if you don't know the sport well. But my wife doesn't like to watch TV with me very much
Sure.
because I tend to sit there and nitpick. No, wait a minute.
I
No, that's
understand that.
not what a
It's the
lawyer
exact
would do.
same
No, he wouldn't do that. It's like, shut up. But anyway, for a while at ESPN, I was sort of the guy. Whenever there was a big event on another network, the Final Four, the Super Bowl, the World Series, whatever it might happen to be, if you had switched over to ESPN, which didn't have the rights to any of those series back in the day, you'd find me doing something for the lady of the house, gymnastics, figure skating, stuff.
Women's sport of figure skating.
Or the Sean of the house.
So,
And I'll tell you this, I loved meeting the athletes along the way in all their variety, and the figure skaters were
there's some tough people.
Hard partying people.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, the athleticism in a lot of the jumps and the core strength you need for some of the spins.
Well, yeah, especially in pairs where, in dance, the guy's not allowed to lift the girl over his head. In pairs, you're expected to.
Yep.
So the women are always petite and the men are always big hulking guys, and they're usually ex-hockey players.
Yep.
And
I
those
will
guys
say,
are
though,
tough.
based on my limited run in doing any sort of duo skating, my biggest falls came in ice dance. Believe it or not, because if you're a guy who has a certain element of not being afraid to fall or get hurt or whatever, jumps actually aren't that big of a deal. Holding somebody up is not that big of a deal because you fall, you get up, life goes on. But the thing is, when you go into a jump, that fall could come. So you're sort of ready. Okay, so if I get the edge wrong or I under rotate, I'm going to fall. I'm just going to let my shoulder drop. And
Nothing
I'm just going to absorb it. That's that. But when you fall ice dancing, so Ryan, you wouldn't know this, but ice dancing is very much, you ever watch Dancing with the Stars?
Yeah.
It's basically a very similar style of ice skating, but on ice. And so, there's kind of preset moves you have to do, and there's sort of patterns you have to do that. But in that whole process, you're never expecting that you're going to fall. So when you do, you hit hard because you had absolutely no idea that you were going down. I swear my biggest falls were in ice dance.
My second cousin medaled in the Olympics for ice skating, Paul Wiley.
Oh, no kidding.
Really?
Yeah.
People used to think I looked like him when I was a little thinner and a little younger.
Right.
So
He was the guy from Harvard, right?
Yeah, I think
I
so.
actually worked with him.
No way. Yeah, that's right, because he did commentary.
I did an open. I can remember doing the open because the producer, a guy named Ralph Millay, thought it'd be really cool. There was this dry fountain in this little town in New Jersey where Ralph's studios were. He said, well, let's go out there. Bob, you stand in the middle where the fountain, upspout is. And Paul, we're going to put you on roller skates, inline skates. And so I'm standing in the middle opening the show, and Paul is, going around me like the ball at the end of the string.
Right.
Yeah, he
God,
was
I remember that like yesterday.
1992. He was the big surprise because he kind of came in. There were three men that went in 1992. It was Christopher Bowman, Todd Eldridge, and Paul Wiley. Yeah, I actually know all this, believe it or not. And Christopher Bowman was the big hot skater, and he had a lot of demons he had to chase, and he showed up just completely fizzled out. Todd Eldridge fizzled out, and this random kind of third guy they sent over showed up out of nowhere.
Ivy
and
Leaguer too.
Yeah, exactly. Oh
right,
God.
Right.
And he was, he just barely missed out on winning. He got the silver, and a lot of people thought he got screwed because he was literally, of the men who went through in '92, the only one who didn't fall.
Right.
It's just he ran a more conservative program than the guy.
What was
who
the guy's
won.
name that won?
Victor Petrenko.
Petrenko, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah. We watched every single, thing that was
Every
on.
single little nuance.
Yeah.
So,
Victor.
yep.
Yeah.
Glad we finally got figure skating in our racing podcast.
There you go. And I can say one of the highlights of my broadcast career was having done a show out in Long Beach, California, and sitting having drinks with Katarina Witt.
There's worse people to have a drink with.
This is
so.
Right.
That's pretty good.
This is as good as it gets.
Going all right.
Before you were married, of course.
Maybe.
What was the conversation? It was a really good conversation.
No, I was probably married at the time. It was just drinks. I mean,
Sure. Yeah. No, we understand. So, but actually, that the ability to be on site and get to know the drivers, the skaters, whatever the athlete is at the time, or the people behind the scenes, the team owner, the engineer. But there's obviously, between budgets and travel, there's I assume there's an increasing shift towards doing your job remote.
Oh, absolutely.
And I assume that's got to create a challenge in the sense that you're not there to really understand what the atmosphere is like.
It's really challenging, and people, a lot of people to this day don't realize we're doing that. And I guess that's a good thing. But we've been doing it since the early '90s when I was doing Formula One for ESPN.
Yeah.
Actually, we actually got in trouble one year because executives found out we did not go to Monaco. It's like, what do you mean you didn't go to Monaco? I thought, well,
Didn't they make the decision?
Aren't we?
Right.
Yeah.
We didn't go to, South Africa. Why would we not go to Monaco?
Right.
Anyway, a lot of the networks do it now. It is the business model. NBC, I guess, does a lot of the Olympics from remote.
Sure.
Somebody told me ESPN is doing things like college basketball remotely.
Oh, wow.
It's got to be really tough, I would think,
Sure.
unless you have a really big screen. But yeah, it's a different way to do television, and it helps if you've actually been there. We traveled
yeah,
the world for
sure.
a long time.
Sure.
ESPN was, I think, the only network that went to all the races for years and years. So tracks like Silverstone and Monaco and Monza and Spa-Francorchamps, I've been there. I know those tracks,
Right.
and I can speak to them. The more recent ones, like Shanghai and Malaysia, my Australian Grand Prix was Adelaide, not
Yeah,
Melbourne.
not Melbourne, sure.
So that is a little bit more difficult. And then there's, as you say, the human side of it. We can actually sit and talk to people and,
Yeah.
kind of react off of them and ask a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Right.
And they see that you're legit, you're here,
Right.
that you're supporting the sport, you're not looking under
And it
rocks.
gives you the
for-
intel beyond a
Right.
press release. They
Right.
could- yeah. sure.
Exactly. You get better answers from people, and you get better information, and that leads to a better broadcast. But it's the business model we work with now, so you do the best you can.
Where were you in Imola '94? Was that
In the basement in Bristol,
where
Connecticut.
you were? So did you have any sense? For those who don't know, we're Senna's accident.
Right.
Did you have any sense of how? Because there's a difference between being at a track and hearing the quiet
Yeah.
versus being in a booth and.
Well,
trying to get a sense.
it goes back to having a good color commentator with you, and I had Derek Daly for that broadcast,
Yeah.
and Derek, like most racers, looked and said,
It's not
Nope.
good.
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
that's not good. And then, we all eventually learned the horrible truth. A lot of people tend to forget there was a whole lot more horrible truth that weekend
Yep.
with Ratzenberger
Yeah.
killed.
Barrichello. had a
We
whole
almost
accident.
lost Rubens
Yeah.
Barrichello
Yeah.
after his huge accident. We had an
Spectators
accident at the
got
start.
injured.
Pedro
Yeah.
Lamy ran into the back of J.J. Leto,
That's right.
and Wheel went in the stands and
Yeah.
hit some people, and then Michele Alboreto plowed into some of his mechanics in the pit lane during a
Right.
stop. It was just
Terrible weekend.
let's go home.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, at ESPN, Chris Fowler, who's now a big star there doing game day for college football. Well, two stories. One, we met a very big-time Sports Center anchor who came in. And one of the beauties of being in Bristol was that we had all of the news-gathering capabilities. It was better than being at the racetrack, frankly, because
Sure.
they were sort of on lockdown, and they weren't learning anything. But we had, this worldwide collection of satellite feeds and whatnot. So one of their announcers came in to start his day doing football, looks around and sees all these racing shots and
Yeah.
Senna and ambulances and all that kind of stuff and says, "What's going on?" And Derek Daly says he told him, well, this really famous race driver was killed in an accident in Europe. And the anchor looked at him and said, who cares?
Oh wow, to
True
Derek
story.
Daly.
Yeah, I said that to
Right.
Derek.
Right.
But we actually hung around because the guys, they wanted us to come on Sports Center and explain,
Yeah.
what a huge blow this was, what a big star Senna was. And as I was leaving the studio, I ran into Chris Fowler, who said, you want to go to lunch? I said, okay. He said, I want to ask you, how you prepare to talk about a fatality happening on
absolutely.
live television right
Yeah.
in front of you. So we did that. And I hope Chris remembers that story, whatever it was I told him. But the truth is, you do prepare.
Yeah.
You prepare for that eventuality. What am I going to say if it happens?
We actually wanted to talk about that, or more to know if you had any sort of training for that sort of situation, because Sean and I, from time to time, Sean's done it every year, but every now and then I'll help out with the Magnus webcast that they do at the 24-hour, and it gets
He probably
something
has
where
no idea what that is.
well, basically,
Yeah.
for people that are
Aware of
listening
it.
that don't, Magnus Racing has a live webcast in their pit
Yep.
box. They bring in drivers and guests from other teams, and it broadcasts throughout the 24-hour. And we generally get a pretty good.
Yeah, we do okay for what it is.
Viewership.
It
Yeah.
does really well.
Good.
Fans
And
are
wish
loyal.
more teams did that.
We were
No,
sitting.
I don't.
We were sitting next to each other when the Mimo Gidley
had his crash.
Ferrari
with-
crash
Yeah.
with the
Matticelli.
DP Matticelli. That's right. And the first thing we thought was wow, we've got 20,000 people clicking into our room every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
They're going to want information, and we're at the track. And so sure enough, we started getting flooded with
Yeah,
questions.
what's going on? What's going
And
on?
we both basically, under the table, were texting each other, we're just not going to say anything.
Yeah.
No speculation, because that's the worst thing you can do.
Well, and legally we can't, with conditions. But I mean that's exactly the thing is in the Magnus webcast, particularly, it's a jokey, fun webcast. We're not supposed to talk about serious things, and now something very serious has happened.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as training for that, or I mean,
Well-
preparation's one thing, but
One of the fascinating things about, probably sports in general, but certainly race driving, because, as Hemingway said, there's only three true sports: motor racing, mountain climbing, and bullfighting.
I'm gonna take you to task on that. But go on.
Okay, you think Hemingway didn't write it?
I,
One of his.
we'll go on. Let's finish
Well,
the story.
anyway, young folks think ESPN came up with that slogan. But obviously, the point was, whoever made the statement was, you got to have the chance of serious injury or even death. I mean, in Hemingway's eyes, that was what made it a real sport, and everything else was just a game that you win or lose. And it's something that I was really curious about, along with the relationship between drivers and mechanics, the relationship of a driver and the, how you view the possibility that you could die in a racing car. And Fangio once said, if a driver's afraid he's going to die in a car, then he shouldn't get into a car.
Right.
And there's a book called The Cruel Sport. It was written around 1960 about one of those savage years when like 8 guys died.
Yeah.
It was every other week somebody was getting killed. And Phil Hill was quoted in that book as saying, there's a driver out here who is not afraid or is crazy enough that he's not afraid of dying, that he will drive in such a way that you have to avoid him. You're either going to have to let him overtake you or you're going to crash. And he says, I think that's evil, that somebody approaches the sport that way, that,
Taking advantage of your absolute fear.
Right.
Yeah.
Forcing you to lift.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
I don't care.
risking
What's the worst that could happen? What are you going to do kind of thing.
Sure.
I kind of garbled that quote, but the gist of it was there's a guy here who says, you're either you're going to die or let me by, and it is evil.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had read into a lot of what drivers had to say about that and arrived at some conclusions of my own, and I just dip into that background when, and hopefully I'd never have to, but
Sure.
I think there's been 4 or 5 occasions in races that I've covered where somebody has died.
Where it's been bad, sure.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Fitzgerald, Paul Newman's teammate in Trans Am in St. Pete.
Good friend of my dad's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a driver, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, in what was then the Firestone Firehawks at Daytona one year. Of course, Senna and Ratzenberger, and it's always hard.
Right.
But sometimes it's even harder to get up in front of people who are of the view that you have to ban things. The Justin
Sure.
Wilson situation we've been to, where somebody out there said, "Okay, we have to ban IndyCar racing."
Yeah, and
What?
you felt that it was a journalist that's trying to make headlines and
Right.
a little bit of clickbait.
Sure.
but-
Yeah, right. Whoever saw this guy in a press room at a racetrack?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How do you deal with that? In the bad old days at Indy, when people were saying, this is crazy, this is a death wish, this is not. It really isn't. But it can be really hard to articulate why. Drivers aren't defying death; they're celebrating life as
Right.
they see
Exactly.
it.
Right.
Exactly.
There's a great line. A friend of mine and I do a lot of reading into the space program. Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and Gus Grissom, who died in the Apollo 1 fire on
Right.
the pad in Florida, was talking about another driver's death. No, he was talking about his own potential for death, and Cernan was quoting him as saying, aviators are a different breed. We do not allow the fear of death to drive the way we live. If we die, please understand that, it was just a consequence of what we were doing. And so that's the kind of thing I try to explore and be ready to explain with, if worst comes to worst.
Well, and on that level, your son raced for
Yep.
several years. Does he still race, or has he kind of moved on?
He's moved on.
Right.
My son, Matt, he made a very mature decision. I think he was like hundreds and hundreds of kids out there, a young guy with talent.
Right.
But, we ran out of money. We couldn't find any more. And he was around the sport long enough. He went through the Barber programs and won a championship with them and did Pro Mazda and raced a couple times in GT cars at Daytona and
Continental
other
Tire
places.
as well.
Yeah.
I raced against him in that. Yep.
There you go. And he said, Dad, I've seen enough of this, and I've been around enough drivers to understand what the lifestyle is like, and
Yeah.
spending the winter on the telephone trying to drum up a drive for the next year. He says, I don't think I want to live that way. I don't want to do that.
Sure. I understand.
And I felt like, no, come on, we'll try it one more season. It was pretty cool watching him go around, I
Right.
have to say. Especially because I think he was pretty good at it. But as I said, there's a lot of those kids who just need a chance. But it was his decision. And
Right.
now he's living out in Jackson, Wyoming, doing what he really loves to do, which is skiing every day he can,
Oh, nice. Okay.
despite breaking his leg twice. And he's got a real estate license. So
Oh, cool.
if anybody wants to buy a home in Jackson, Wyoming, look up
Matt
Matt
Varsha
Varsha.
Real estate.
He's your guy.
Yeah.
I think it was Jody Scheckter had the quote, the best racing driver in the world somewhere on a tractor right now. Because the guy didn't make it, didn't get the
Yeah,
shot, but
right.
probably had the talent.
Oh, yeah,
didn't
that's
have the
true.
money.
Yeah, Fernando Alonso said that after his first championship. He said, I raced karts with 25 guys who could do this.
Yeah.
But I got the chance, or I was in the right place at the right time, or, You know,
Right.
I did the most I could with the opportunity, and now here I am.
Now, have you ever tried to take to the wheel?
Not in any formalized, aggressive way. I've been to driving schools, which I recommend to everybody, whether you never get near a race car.
Right.
I think there's an awful lot of useful things to learn. In fact, I put my kids through as soon as they got their licenses, and my wife went through. My
Oh, cool.
wife, Karen.
Okay.
I am basically the third best driver in my family. My son Matt's the best. My wife, Karen, is good, but she
Sure.
suffers from vertigo.
Oh.
So she went out and to the school out at Road Atlanta one year and just kicked all the boys' butts in the
Right.
autocross, and then we went to lunch and she threw up. But within a couple of months of the test, she was out on a rainy day and she came home and said, it worked.
Yeah.
You know, I did what I was supposed to do. And that's really, you know, the point of the whole exercise.
Has she become a fan of the sport? That's a no. Look
Well-
at that breath. Nah.
She's a qualified fan of the sport. If she has a reason to watch, she's become close friends with Carol Edwards,
Okay.
mother of John Edwards, who
Yep.
races for the Team RLL and the
Yep.
BMWs. And so they like to go to the races together, and you know she wants to watch to see how John's doing. And,
Sure.
and the other people that she's gotten to know, drivers she's gotten to know through hanging out with me. But you know, when it comes to racetracks, you know, if I do wind up going back to Monaco, she's in there.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
She likes
yeah.
Monterey.
I was going to say,
She
everybody
likes
likes
Road
to go to
America.
Laguna.
But
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know that
We're
there are
going
other
to
places
Kansas.
where she's
Yeah,
not
I
rushing
gotcha.
off to.
Kansas. We raced at Iowa once.
Oh, I forgot about it.
That was terrible.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I have gotten in cars. I've driven race cars. I'm not a racer.
Sure. I understand that.
I was able to figure that out right away. Although, you know, I didn't have the racer's advantage of being the professional driver who knows if you wrecks the car, he just walks away from it. You know, I figure out how am I going to pay for this.
Right. Yeah. That's a few of us.
But I will say it's the best stress reliever in the world is doing a track day. I mean, if
Sure.
you're into cars at all, going out and driving around and you know and really focusing with the kind of intensity that you need to is just really exhilarating.
Right.
A lot of fun.
How do you think the sport has changed from late 80s to now? I mean, obviously safety has taken strides, but you know, we seem to see a big cultural shift way towards safety. And there's a lot of differences now in how people view the relevance of technology and what they should be doing. But I don't know, from somebody like you who's been in it for as long as you have.
Seen the waves, you know,
Yeah.
GTP where it was an arms race to back to nothing to split series.
You know, it's always kind of a bubbling cauldron. There's always issues that occasionally come to the fore. One is, you know, what's the role of the manufacturers in the series?
Yeah.
Expense, technology. How do you achieve the balance so that people can actually come in? It's like any sport. You need new blood all the time. You need fresh people, and particularly in sports cars, which forever has relied on enthusiasts with resources
Right.
who want to go out and do it, and hopefully they have an appropriate amount of talent that they go out and not put themselves and others in danger. But you really do need guys who will come to the table and spend money on teams and equipment
Yeah.
and so forth. You know, a solution to that might be to make the sport less expensive, but that probably means, and this is a terrible phrase to use, but dumbing down the technology a little bit.
Yeah, I understood.
Then you look at sports like Formula One, where they're running, you know, these incredibly complex and expensive hybrids that nobody seems to like, but the manufacturers seem to be insisting have to be at the core of the sport, or they're not interested.
It's got to
because-
maintain the road relevance.
Right,
Yeah.
they want the road relevancy.
Yeah.
So, you know, these are tough issues to deal with. And I was sitting actually at the IMSA banquet last night thinking, you know, the job that Scott Atherton and his staff have to do in terms of manufacturer teams, pro-am driver lineups, you know, technology, how much is too much.
Right.
Um,
Now, like a professional journalist, you answered that question without actually answering it,
Okay.
which is awesome. No, I give you credit for
and I
that.
did it without thinking, so.
It's on autopilot right now.
But and I'm not asking for an opinion, but do you see rule change shifts or a culture in the sport kind of move towards this direction, or a new formula coming out in a couple of years in whatever the series? And I'm not asking for opinions, but do you go, oh, that's dumb? You know, in the back of your mind, you're never going to put it on Twitter. You're never going to say it to anybody on a podcast. But you have to have opinions on things.
There are situations that I find difficult to understand sometimes. You know, it's easy to write off IndyCar, for example,
Sure.
saying, well, you know, they lost their roots as America's open wheel national championship, or maybe you don't like the cars, or maybe you don't like the fact that the whole economic spiral has reached a point where more guys are renting rides
ride
than
buyers,
previously. And make no mistake, buying a ride has always existed in motorsports.
Absolutely.
You know, from Graham Hill on forward, I don't think there's a single world champion who didn't get there without somebody writing a check.
Absolutely.
But, you know, having said that, I'm not smart enough to know what the answers are. How do you recover what you've lost with the IRL Champ Car split?
Right.
You know, that's a problem out there that needs to be addressed, and I'm sure people are trying. But I tell you, one of the big problems faced by motorsports is finding its place in the landscape of the TV world these days.
Entertainment.
Absolutely.
This
Yeah.
incredible array of distractions, you know,
Right,
other
right.
things you can go do. How do you get young people on board? You know,
Right.
all the gamers out there. I
Yeah.
think what Nissan's got going with their GT Academy is
Absolutely.
pretty darn cool. And whether or not that's borne fruit in terms of attracting more young
Sure.
people to actually come to racetracks. You know, attendance is down everywhere. So if people are fans, why aren't they
Right.
coming out and filling up these places?
Yeah.
Ticket prices have a lot to do with that, I'm sure.
You know, on that sort of growth of internet culture, Ryan, you and I haven't talked about this, but the Bob Varsha Twitter account is one of my favorites because you are
Really?
just matter of fact in how you answer people. There's no
Well-
funny quips, no hashtags, no tagging other people inside. You just, somebody says, "What do you think about this?" And you go, "No." And, and
Right.
that's it. Like, it's
I-
just so straight and to the point. I just love that.
I
Well, I've only
actually-
got 140 characters.
That's right. I actually interacted with you once because
Did you?
I noticed sometimes you'll just put out like a stream of tweets, like maybe you haven't checked it in a while, and you
Uh-huh.
start going through and replying, and so it'll be like one after the next
Yeah,
for an
yeah.
hour, and then
And then
quiet
that's
for
it
a week or
yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And you were going on not a tangent necessarily, but you were just going down the ring. You know, like, okay, I'll answer this guy, and this guy. And
Yeah.
I had a
Mhm.
race the next morning. I think like Laguna or somewhere I thought I had a chance to win. Like we were fastest in practice or something. I think it was just last year. And I just said, "Hey Bob, do you think I can win tomorrow?" That was it. And then like 10 minutes after the race, you replied, "No, looks like no." And I like retweeted him like, "That's priceless."
Well-
that's priceless.
Yeah, I got myself in trouble back in the pre-Twitter days, when you'd go on forums. The big thing was
Yep.
forums.
Sure.
So Speed, as it was known then, had a forum, and I'd go on there and do just what you said. You know, I'd answer a million questions and then just stop for a while.
Yeah.
And I started getting flack because I did that. You know. Somebody was waiting for an answer, and I wasn't giving it to them.
Yep.
So I thought, well, geez, do I really want to do this? I find Twitter fascinating because of that limitation. You know, it's got to
Yeah.
be a short answer.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I'll do the whole thing over again. I'll just, lie in bed before I go to sleep at night and just.
Yeah.
And I don't hashtag things because, frankly, I'm not going to go see what
And
people
it's
are
not
saying
gonna,
about
it's not
it.
going to change your job any.
Right.
Right.
You want an answer? Here's my answer.
Right.
Send.
Right.
So but it's great, and I appreciate the fact that people appreciate me responding to their tweets because
Right.
if you're going to ask a question, you deserve an answer, and try to answer as many as I can. But obviously, there's a limit.
Well,
Sure.
And I do get the guys coming back saying, "Will you stop answering all these questions? You're filling up my mailbox." And I just
Screw
don't
those
want
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care about them. One thing I like about Twitter versus other forms of social media, where if somebody sends you a friend request, they automatically you're following each other, like on Facebook or something like that. Or when you're doing the broadcasts, they don't have a choice but to listen to you. So when someone follows you, that means that they actually want to hear what you have to say
Yeah.
specifically. So then when you do reply to those guys, I know it means a lot to a lot of fans, especially someone that's seen so much of the different types of racing throughout your career. I mean, you got to call Senna versus Prost races and things like that. So
Yep.
to a lot of people, that means a lot.
Yep.
But yeah, interaction I think is this is interaction. I think some people are going to be surprised when they see the list of
That's what we're looking
people we
forward
have.
to.
They're like, "Oh, Bob Varsha."
And you still have no idea where this is going. Or you just showed up, which I give you a ton of credit for.
Yeah.
That's actually there's really no way to respond to this, but I got to give you a lot of credit because you and I don't really know each other. And I wrote you a year and a half ago to have your voice in a Magnus video.
That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you what it was for. I didn't give you any context. I just said I need you to read these lines, and your answer was, "Yeah, all right." And it's like, what? This guy is willing to do this,
Right.
And then I was like, "Hey, you want to join Ryan and I for lunch?" Like, "Yeah, fine." Like, it blows my mind that you're willing to do this with because you're a respected professional. I would argue maybe we're not, and yet you could care less.
Well,
So-
I love what I do, and a big
Right.
part of what I do is interacting with people. So, as I like to say, we're all friends here.
Sure.
You know, even if that's not necessarily literally true, it's, you know, if people care enough to ask a question, I think they deserve an answer if I can give them one.
Right.
You know, and you guys are a part of the same community.
Sure.
You know, so if I can
And the
help
rate
out-
we're paying you is huge.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
you
I mean,
know.
who could turn down this kind of money?
I mean, that sweet tea is or that
Yeah, that-
unsweet tea is like at least $2.
The sweet's more
Yeah,
expensive.
if we had to put the sugar in, it'd be another story.
That'd be over the budget.
Nah, it's all part of this great big, you know, community of racers and race fans and sports generally and social media and all. I just love it. My wife and I were talking last night after the banquet about, you know, where would we like to live if we're actually thinking of leaving Atlanta and trying someplace for a while.
If you're going to work in racing full time, not California. Let me tell you firsthand, that is a lot
just
of
the
time
traveling,
zone changes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it wears on you.
I got to be within a reasonable distance of Charlotte because that's where our studios
Sure,
are. So
sure.
we look at places like Asheville and Charleston before it sank beneath the waves this past weekend.
Right. Well, now's the time to buy.
Beaufort, South Carolina. Right, exactly. You can have that mud hole over there. But I really feel for those folks. But yeah, so you know, it's time to stretch. But I just can't see myself ever, quote unquote, retiring.
Yeah.
I'd go nuts.
Right.
You know, I'm going to do this as long as I can because it's great fun, and I love the travel,
Sure.
and I love the people I get to deal with. I'd like to do more different sports again,
Yeah.
which is an appeal I've
Well, now
sent
that
to
we
Los
see-
Angeles a number of times. and
Now that we
fallen
see
on deaf
motorsports
ears.
kind of, you know, motorsports has kind of gone back to being with larger networks, NBC Sports, Fox Sports in your case. Do you see that opportunity kind of burgeoning? Like you're starting to do the Barrett Jackson stuff, which isn't really sport, but it's at least away from the trackside stuff that you're used to doing. Is that opportunity down the road that you might be able to do more sports again?
I wish I knew.
Okay.
But I don't. As I say, I've been trying for several years to, you know, to flag down somebody who can say, yeah, go do a baseball game or a football game or or gymnastics or whatever. Just because I love getting up to speed on something, putting a credible broadcast together, and having a good time doing it because sports are fun.
Absolutely.
It's storytelling, and it's something I really love. So hopefully somewhere down the line I'll get that opportunity. And when Formula One went to NBC, I mean, Lee Diffie, damn him, got my dream job. Lee's a good buddy, and he's doing a great job, but that was my dream job,
Sure.
doing some Olympic sports, which is where I came from originally.
Right.
And doing, open wheel motorsports and motorsports of all sorts. I mean,
Well,
it's
I mean,
great.
you have good chemistry with, seems like all of your booth mates, so to speak. But that Steve Matchett, David Hobbs chemistry you guys have, to me, seems unbeatable. And nothing against Lee, of course, but how does that achieve? Like, is it just the fact that you guys are three personalities who kind of understand each other? Is that years of working together? What's kind of led to that kind of what I believe is some of the best chemistry out there?
Well, it was kind of a magic moment. We needed another guy for the booth. Actually, at one point, we had 4 announcers in the booth in Connecticut doing Formula One. Myself, David, Steve, and Sam Posey. Steve was hired by our vice president of production, Frank Wilson, who had read his books. It was, what year would it have been? The mid-'90s. We had the 24 Hours of Le Mans and the Canadian Grand Prix taking place on the same weekend, and we were short announcers. David was going to be sent off to do Le Mans because that's his
what he
first
knows,
love.
sure.
And he and Sam were going to Le Mans, and I was going to work in the studio, and they needed somebody next to me. So Frank, on a whim, knew this guy who's an ex-mechanic
You
who
probably just left Benetton at this
seemed
time, so,
articulate.
yeah.
And called him up, and Steve said, yeah, I'll do that. So Steve came in, and we had a good broadcast, and then David came back, and we had this, I don't know if you want to call it luck, this instant chemistry because Dave was the driver.
Right.
And instead of having another driver in there, you now had a mechanic. So
sort
you
of
got both
foil
sides
him,
of the
right,
street. So
yeah.
I give Steve all the credit in the world for pioneering that role of the mechanic in the booth. And
Yeah.
we see often now on broadcasts.
Sure,
But
sure.
he was really the first guy who came up there and made that work, taking a whole different perspective, and whether it was in fun, you drivers were all a bunch of prima donnas.
Right.
You don't know anything about the car. Let me tell you about the car. It just really worked.
Right.
And it was one of those magic times, and I'll be forever grateful for having that time together. And it's probably not repeatable at this point, but you never know.
Never know.
There's 2 guys that come to mind for like color commentary that are known for kind of saying things off the cuff. Dorsey Schrader and David Hobbs.
Yeah.
Have either of them ever said something on air that you looked at them and you thought like, we can't see what you guys are saying to each other or looking at each other,
Yeah, there's a lot of eye
I was
contact.
going to say, I've heard a few things out of those guys before that I was like, wow, he really said that.
Right.
And I just
Throw
wondered-
Justin Bell in
Oh,
there, too.
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect example. Great. Yeah, exactly
as
right.
Calvin said at the banquet last night, Justin's one of those guys who says what I'm thinking because I'm not going to say it.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, there's obviously things that really shouldn't be said for whatever reason, just because they're not appropriate for television. Dorsey, of course, was famous for his malaprops. You see that tree behind the tree and all that kind of thing. David is famous for his incredibly spot-on expressions. That's not a real word, but you know exactly what he's saying when he talks about the clag on the racetrack.
Yeah.
And what's a schmozzle, and, that
there
kind
was-
of thing.
I think in Oxford, it was Spa '98 with all the rain, everybody piles up, and Ricardo Rosset just comes flying full speed into everybody, and just out of nowhere you hear, "Well, not much between the ears for that boy." He can say it, I guess. So.
Oh yeah. Well, you kind of want that. It's not supposed to be all sweetness and light.
Right.
I pick on golf commentary all the time because this horrible shank goes into the crowd or into the lake or through a nearby store window, and the worst you'll hear of golf commentary is, "Well, that's not what he wanted on that shot."
right.
But unless you had Johnny Miller, who was like the equivalent of a racing commentator, it's like, man, he choked on that. What was he thinking?
I can actually argue against that sometimes in sports car racing, you actually are probably the more direct with what you're seeing. You'll say, "Oh, that wasn't too bright," or something along those lines. But for a period of time, this is more in the speed vision days, someone would be running 13th out of 15 cars, and I would hear, "Oh, he's doing a great job. They're running 13th," because they'd pick him up on camera for the time being. And I always thought, no, 13th out of 15 sucks. He's not having a good day. Like, he's miserable right
Well,
now.
that's got to be one of the challenges, too, because sports car, and I mean, really all racing now, but especially sports car, where there are a lot of gentlemen that are paying to be there.
Right.
They're going to leave if they're insulted on television constantly. That's got to be a tough game when you see something that is just not intelligent.
It's a bit of a high wire act, for sure.
Yeah.
I try not to be judgmental because I don't have anything to judge by. I'm not the ex-driver.
Right.
I've not been in that situation, so it's not fair of me to, you don't have to be a chicken to judge an omelet, but by the same token, I try not to go there. I like to be descriptive, and try to sometimes maybe state the obvious, but,
Right.
Again, I have the color commentators who can explain
kinda do
exactly what just happened.
Right.
But there are so many of those sorts of things in a broadcast. You want the newbies to feel like they belong, so there's certain
Sure.
things you have to explain to them. And then there's the sophisticated end of the fan scale where they know everything already, maybe know more than you do about it.
Right.
And so you want to give them what they need without boring them to death.
Sure.
I
Right.
used to get
Right,
a lot
right,
of
fine.
flack because we describe the Formula One qualifying process in every qualifying
in every
show.
broadcast, sure.
And I would get emails and tweets like, "Why do you have to go through the protocol every time?" Well, because a lot of folks might be tuning in who have no idea
don't
what
know.
they're looking
Sure.
at. So
Sure.
again, it's that's a bit of a high wire act. You want to be entertaining, you want to tell stories, and it's kind of a mentally draining process from time to time. Especially, I tell people, they ask, what races do you like to call? I like a good race.
Right.
The good races are easy to call because stuff is happening.
Yeah,
and it all means something. The really hard races to call are the boring ones.
Sure.
Because that's when your mind starts to wander and you're scratching for something to talk about. You start saying stupid things.
Right.
So
That's
that
just
can
everyday
be-
life for us.
Those are the races where they're like doing a great job at 13th. Yeah, now I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, like Robin Miller says, if I hear one more time that we had a good top 20 car today, it's going to drive me nuts. But that's why you need those kinds of personalities, like
sure.
him, like Dorsey, like
Yeah.
David, like Justin.
Justin, for sure.
You need a variety of personalities and people who take different positions on things. And
Right.
There's nothing wrong with a good argument every now and then.
Right.
We actually worked with Justin Bell a couple of years ago. He raced with me in the 24-hour
Yep,
at
Magnus,
Magnus,
yeah.
and he did a great job. I mean, he hasn't raced in a while, and he was right there on pace and everything. So when I do hear him be critical of somebody on TV, my first thought is like, he can back that up. Like,
Yeah.
he can go get in that car and still do it.
Yep.
Dorsey, I'm sure, is the same,
Oh, yeah.
So I actually kind of enjoy when Justin's a little bit controversial because it's like the guy he's a Le Mans winner and
he's
like
come
a
from
GT
somewhere.
champion, He's
And
the
now,
man.
with IMSA's rules about the FIA driver ratings, and you
Yeah.
turn 50, you become a silver,
Right.
Yeah.
And you need a good silver driver if you're in a pro-am
Absolutely.
class.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, all of our guys, Brian Till, Calvin, Justin,
Yeah.
we're all talking about.
Yeah.
Well, it's
"Turn
coming
50,
up.
boy.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I'm a silver.
That's right.
I'm out of here.
Speaking of gold drivers, we had dinner with a little bit sauced Catherine Legg last night, and we we're gonna have to edit half of it. But
Was she rowdy?
she wasn't rowdy.
She was honest.
Let's just say we have a bet between us. Like we're what are we about? About 15 hours post dinner, I guess you
Yeah.
call it,
Yeah.
and we're waiting for the. Can we talk about last night? Kind of text.
Can you
because
Right.
Can
can
we
we
maybe
redo
not
that?
mention some of the things I mentioned?
Yeah.
We're waiting for that.
But-
But there was there's a segment. We kind of cued you on this before, but there is a segment where we have every meal that we have kind of get passed on to the next with a question. So Catherine had a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, Catherine's question. Well, she had two actually, and we kind of shut the first one down. But her first question was, actually, now there's three
well,
questions.
okay.
Okay.
So her
pick
first
which one?
question, and she's going to regret it, and so we can't delete this now. But she said, "Do you prefer to have your loo roll over or under?" And my first thought was, "Is he going to know what a loo roll is?"
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Excuse me.
Over. 100% over.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair
All right,
enough.
Fair enough.
The second of the three questions
Just
was
between us boys, what was Catherine's answer to that question? Did you ask her?
she didn't tell us.
Yeah,
You
we
didn't?
never got.
No?
No, we spent the entire
Ah.
time wondering what a loo roll was.
Yeah.
'Cause I was like, a jazz singer? I don't.
Hey, listen, you work with Steve Matchett and David Hobbs,
Yeah.
and either Peter Windsor or Will Buxton, these guys all these years.
Right.
You know way more than what a loo is, but
She also wanted to know if quote, is that your everyday voice?
yep.
Yeah, that's the one we shut
We
down.
kinda
We're
had
like,
a
I'm
feeling,
pretty
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's faking
I
it.
wouldn't know how to change my voice.
Yeah.
Right.
Not having been through broadcast school,
Right.
I get letters from young people all the time. How do I get a start in television? They say, well, my job kind of found me, so I don't
Sure.
I don't
Yeah.
quite know what to tell you except start at the bottom. And
Do you think that would, if you, and not that you really set out to be a broadcaster, but knowing how saturated broadcasting is now between a million cable channels and internet feeds, do you think if you'd gone to Emory in the year 2015, do you think that same path could have found you in the way it did?
Wow, that's a good question, and I'd have to say probably not.
Right.
I think I was just so fortunate. It was just such a great moment in time for me personally. I don't know if it's repeatable.
Right.
Maybe, but I'd have to. I hate to have to try it.
Sure.
Right. So, Catherine's real question: hardest thing you've ever had to say on the air? We thought maybe a situation,
Yeah.
versus like just a one thing you
Or,
couldn't get
or
out,
just the name Marcus Winkelhoff.
right, or something along those lines, like Winky.
The hardest thing in terms of difficulty actually saying it, or like when Senna's dead, or
Let's go situational, like toughest thing.
gosh. I really can't think of something offhand because part of my job is being ready and willing to say whatever needs to be said at a given moment. And aside from the horrifying reality of a fatality, I can't really think of something that was ever really difficult for me to say on the air, except Formula One has a new home on another network next year, and I'm not going there, so that was pretty tough.
That'll be a good one.
I managed not to cry doing that, but that would probably be it, saying goodbye to Formula One, which is ironic because it had left me once before, too, at
Right.
ESPN,
Right.
and I chased it to speed, but yeah, I'd have to go with that. I will admit to having enough ego that I take pride in being ready, willing, and able to address anything
Sure.
on the air, especially when the microphone's not turned on.
So in that same segment, we're going to move into your question, and our next interview is going to be Bo Barfield, who's former chief steward at IndyCar,
Sure.
currently at IMSA.
Yep.
If you had one question for Bo, what would you come up with?
What is the one thing television does or television announcers do that drives you crazy?
I think that's probably going to be, we got our hour filled.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
But let me tell you.
Yeah,
So-
well, it's
Now, do you guys know each other? I mean, I don't know how much between, like,
Oh,
say,
yeah.
the officials team and the broadcast team, how much interaction.
yeah.
there
We
is.
meet with Bo and Paul Walters and
Yeah.
and usually some other IMSA officials every race weekend.
Right.
Talk about whatever we have questions about, whether it's how the racetrack's going to set up or what specific rules, and go zones and,
Yeah.
pit in and out and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we usually spend between half hour and an hour chatting about one thing or another.
Well, I gotta say, I can't give you enough credit for coming out here on a whim.
Oh,
With
my pleasure.
two people you don't really know, and you didn't even eat. You didn't even get your compensation for this deal.
I'm not costing you guys anything.
Yeah, no, we should have more guests.
It's a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Budget's in line.
Yeah.
Happy to do it anytime.
Cool. All right. Well, Continental's got the check.
Is that your sign off?
I'm finished.
The sounds of Bob Varsha. I honestly can't give that guy enough credit for sort of what a willing participant he's been in a number of things we've done together. So kudos to Bob. Thanks again for that. Continuing our tradition of closing out these conversations with bands that we like and friends of ours, we're going to turn our attentions to an old buddy of mine, Anthony Lax, who's in a band called Stony Spring out here in Los Angeles. Stony Spring's got a couple of albums out now on iTunes. Real cool, kind of fun sound to them. We'll probably play a couple of their tracks over the series. But the first one I want to play is a song called Jobs. It's actually on an old album of theirs, but still a good one. You can check them out on iTunes. Again, it's Stony Spring, available on iTunes. Here's a sample.
I don't blame Steve Jobs for what he's done to our bodies and our brains. No, no, no. I blame you and me for making Steve Jobs feel like what he done was right. I don't blame Steve Jobs for what he's done to our planet and our workers and our slaves. You know, everything we've done since 1982 was wrong, and Steve Jobs was just a puppeteer in a turtleneck. And I don't blame Steve Jobs for turning rock and roll into a store at the mall. I blame you and me for accepting the seduction of being normal. I don't blame Steve Jobs for driving a spike through the heart of the public space. No, no, no. I blame you and me for retreating into fantasy, fingering our half-formed thoughts in our sleek, sexy, crumbling civilization. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't blame Steve Jobs for castrating what's left of the left wing. No, no, no. I blame you and me for begging Steve Jobs for anesthesia. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And a prescription to cure ambiguity and confusion and the struggle to carve out one's own life like a showing knife. The man had 14 wives. Let me check my text messages. My kid's got lice. Fuck it. I don't blame Steve Jobs for making us timid and effete. No, no, no. I blame you and me for paying Steve Jobs to turn those sins into a lifestyle. Whoa, badge of honor, and eventually a state-enforced edict.